AllReasonNoLogic.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Thermal Shock for a community-submitted 8v8. On the leading the red team, we have Hazard starting off as Cortex, and leading the blue team, we have MVP starting off as Armada. Thermal Shock is an interesting map because it pits both teams in essentially symmetrical locations, but not opposite each other. So we have a close position for two of the front players, and a lot of winding chasms, which will result in several 1v1s and a group fight throughout the entire match.
We've got plenty of attack paths through this map. The lava covers a good portion of that top side, which limits what you can get through. So we've got some relatively small chokes all through there, and then a much more open lower left side where the players are much closer to each other.
Yeah, and one of the things, a lot of the economy is actually sitting in these middle areas where we have the team that controls the lava area best will control 6 geos, or 5 geos, which is not an insignificant amount of resources. Similarly, the group that controls the lower battlefield controls a significantly larger amount of mexes and a smaller choke if they manage to push up, which could be the difference. We've got some ticks coming out from the yellow player, as well as some coming out from the green player. In fact, quite a lot coming out of both of the green players. We'll see just how much damage they can get done.
Looks like those green players will make it into that light yellow player.
Yep.
Targeting any units up to defend.
Getting rid of that grave robber is actually quite a big deal, because it means those crystals account for a huge amount of the early stable wind. It's not too bad at the moment because the wind is currently sitting at 16, but there is a wind risk of 10%, which means that there is a good chance that wind will not be efficient. In fact, one in every 10 seconds or so through this game, the wind should be inefficient.
Interesting start for the dark green player, having a Centurion as its first unit out. But that'll definitely handle anything that comes out of this lower red side.
Yeah. Provided that it can get into position in time. It is not a fast unit, and we're actually seeing a tick in the back of his base showing off just how that can be a problem. Com is closing in to try and take it out, which it does. So fortunately for the green player, it doesn't quite lose a mex. So good little play there. We've got a little attack coming in from the light blue player that's managed to get a couple of pawns through the chasms and behind the light yellow player's base, taking out 2 mechs and proceeding on to the red player.
It's kind of nice to see them continue on.
Yep.
Once they've done that damage, rather than staying around and falling.
Yep.
Moving on to the next player and doing what they can.
Takes out another mech.
At this point, they're going to be dead. They're not coming back to base.
No, once you push this deep on in. Something which you can actually do in that situation is put the healthy pawn up front, because a pawn with 1 health and a pawn with full health deal the same amount of damage, so if you can keep those lower health ones alive, then that can certainly help. These pawns trying to push into the next base, but they're going to run into LLTs and a pawn, so no further damage there, but still 3 mexes and a wind is not bad for the combined efforts of a handful of pawns. Looking up at the middle of the map again.
In the middle there,
yep.
The blue players seem to be getting more of a foothold in the middle.
Definitely, but with
a few extra units.
With the aggressive com, the LLT has been taken out, and if those LLTs are not supported, they're not actually overly useful. They can stop They can stop 1 or 2 run-bys of ticks or pawns or grunts, but unless they have that extra little bit with them, they can fall to a D-gun or just not hold the space. And it looks like the maroon player has started his foothold. We'll see if he can push the light blue player out. Similarly, in the top side, we have a choke fight between the teal player and the orange player. Teal player at advantage with those rocketeers, able to hit the tower without being in range and deal damage to the comm. So lots of little skirmishing there. Jumping back down to the bottom quadrant of the map, this is turning into quite a chaotic fight, with the blue team pushing in a little deep and almost gets surrounded by the yellow player, but not quite, and gets a nice surround on those yellow pawns. evening out that fight quite nicely. Yellow is trying to take the lowest quadrant of the map, but looking on the high ground, we have the purple player starting to make his way across. We'll see how this combat develops over time.
There has been a lot of units in both yellow and red making their way around that sort of bottom edge of those cliffs.
Yeah.
And I think that's largely why that purple player's come down to block those off.
Yep. Trying to close off this, securing this area is one of the bigger win conditions on the map because it's the most open fighting area. So if you can fight it on the closed side, which is here for the blue team and here for the red team, it's a much smaller area to control. Another little skirmish going on down here, definitely red favored there. Manages to push those blue pawns back out, but now he's run a couple of units around the cliff on the purple side, losing a few units there.
Sneaking some of those mexes.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they shouldn't be available for him to take, but it definitely puts your comm in a risky position, partially behind the front lines there.
Exactly, and with the green player just above him taking out those LLTs and the mexes, yellow has lost control of this area. If we look on the high ground, the red player is looking to make a bot transition up on that high ground. He's eaten his lab on his side, which means that he's not going to have more troops coming forward. Seeing a small amount of shurikens punching their way through and delaying some of the red units, and currently blue continuing to push in Centurions backed up by grunts. Not a bad fight, and we have resurrection going on, so the enemy's army is turning into... the red army is turning into a blue army on the field, so all of these little advantages will start to add up over time. With this
I like seeing with this bottom fight is that the blue side has supported the purple comm that's pushing in further, keeping that aggression kind of away from where he's been.
Yep.
So despite the fact that he's pushed in a long way, and it looks like those two commanders
are about to have they're about to have a bit of a fight. The red comm successfully blocking the D-gun. Looks like both of these comms are just going to duke it out and try and rely on the explosion to take each other out. Doesn't look like either of them are going to back off. So this should be two dead comms, which it is. Good little bit of pressure there. Purple losing his comm isn't great, but that leaves red very underpowered in that top section, and with all those grunts coming through, this should be a clean sweep up there. I've zoomed out a little bit so that we can see what's going on above us. Green is just using his Rocketeers to great effect, punching through light yellow right as these grunts are coming on in to take out the red base.
It's great to see those grunts coming through immediately after those comms are gone down.
Red
before red gets a chance to
red is detonating his lab, which causes all of the pawns to be destroyed, because with the lab exploding and all the pawns right next to it, great little move there. Denies the medal and also killed that army off, but it doesn't quite look like it's going to be enough. There is 13 Centurions marching down on the front line, backed up by Rocketeers, and they are punching right on in. So even though if we look up to the top section of the top section of the map a little bit, Pink really has pushed across, but he's only holding and not pushing in, which isn't going to win them the fight. Orange is hanging on desperately in this choke, and it looks like a bit of a stalemate between the orange and the aqua player, and then light blue has been pushed off of this area by red. However, the LLTs aren't actually letting him push, just hold that space, so the only areas that are actually pushing is the bottom of the map, and it is pushing for green in a big way.
So that top half of the map, and there's lots of action happening down the bottom. The light yellow commander's fallen on the front line.
Yep.
And the blue team is immediately reclaiming that medal.
Yeah, the light yellow commander falling in the top section, and they're actually going for a resurrection on it, so they're gaining themselves an extra comm. So something which is worth noting is that comms generate 2 metal a second, which means that over time, over 600 seconds or thereabouts, you actually pay for a comm's corpse. At this stage in the game, with everything pushing in so well, I don't think that they'll get the value of that comm, which is why they turned around and decided to eat it.
It is always satisfying to throw a comm into someone's base and watch it explode there. So, if for no other reason, I'm not necessarily against it.
Yep. Just for just for everyone's information, yes, if you put a comm inside of an air transport and Control D the air transport right over the enemy base, it will comm explode, and it is devastating.
That is good to know.
Yep. We've got blue pushing into red's conversion, takes out the blue pawns, but red is really on the ropes. So even though we have a couple of winning lanes in pink and maroon for the red team, their winning lanes are only winning in that they are deadlocked, not that they are actually... They're deadlocked in over the halfway mark, not that they're actually pushing in. And we've got
And
another
one lane
comm
that loses
destroyed
a
by
base from the
MVP
side
Pete.
ends up losing regardless anyway.
Yeah. So as this game goes on the blue side, it looks like we've had a resign vote called from the red players, but they're not quite ready to give in the tower. They think that their forces in the middle of the map and the top of the map might be enough to clinch the game. But with all this firepower down the bottom, that is going to be a tough fight. Something which...
You can see those units just streaming in around that bottom lava.
Yeah.
So that the positions they're holding in the middle, when they can't get their reinforcements to them anymore and the base dies,
and we're
they're
seeing
not
that...
going to be able to sustain those.
We're seeing that right now with the Rocketeers punching through that maroon section, and that is the surrender and the GG. The red team has given up on that one. Now, before we jump into the... Actually, we'll jump into the stats, and then after that, I'd actually like to hear your thoughts on how you might have turned that game around as red. So, looking at the stats, we've got damage dealt. Based on what we saw, this makes really good sense. The purple and the light green player were playing very aggressively and constantly in the enemy territory. Very understandable they're going to be the highest damage. Looking at energy produced, we can see quite a lot of the red team putting more money into eco than the blue team, which makes sense again because the blue team put their eco into units. And as it turns out, that was the better choice this time round. And for metal produced, because of all the reclaim, the blue team certainly did a little on the better side with that one. Looking at the statistics, we've got a total total damage of 217k for the blue team and 157 for the red team. The offensive team is almost always ahead in this case. Meta-wise,
the key difference there is probably the damage efficiency.
Yeah. 127% to 71%. And when you're fighting defensively, you actually have a good opportunity to have better efficiency because you can fight with your towers, but not this time around. Metal was only about 10k, 12k difference, so it shouldn't actually have been the biggest change in the world, especially considering that the blue team had a large air investment that never got used. And energy, again, not too far off. Those were contributing factors, but not the be-all and end-all. So, quick question for you, Tank Tom. How do you think the red team could have turned this one around?
I think in these scenarios, if you're losing somewhere, you have to start drawing aggro to other lanes. Blue could essentially hold the middle, and because they were pushing through that bottom side, they didn't have to be aggressive on that top half of the map. As long as they contained there, they were relatively safe.
Yep.
Whereas for red, they either had to punch through one of those. If they'd done that, then that would have opened up the map significantly for them to punch into the blue ecos from the top side, or
Yep.
send some reinforcements down to their bottom so that they could hold that as well.
Yep. So looking at the blue team, which is the only one remaining on the map at the moment, the thing which I identify here is that there is essentially no defenses throughout all of this base, which means that if you tried some sort of air cheese, or if you tried to just punch through one of these lanes with everything you had, you may not have been able to stop that frontline push, but you might have been able to base race or do enough damage to then hold that bottom area. So I think that your suggestion is a very sensible one, whereas mine is more of a bit of a cheese one, and I'm always a bit of a fan of throwing in some extrajudicial tactics.
But I think wrapping up, congratulations to the blue team. They did a great job of controlling that bottom side of the map.
Yep.
And then making the most of their advantage. They worked as a team there. They got units there.
Yep.
And then once it started falling, they capitalized on the advantages they got. They jumped on the comms as soon as they could res or reclaim them and use
Hmm.
that to create more units and push on through. And their early couple of raids were great as well. Not that it does a whole lot, but that starts stacking as the game continues.
Yep. Well, we'd like to just put out a bit of a thank you to MV Pete, who submitted this replay to us. If you enjoyed the replay, please leave a like and subscribe. If you want to leave any feedback for us, drop us a comment. And if you want to leave us a replay or get in on the action, join us on the AllReasonNoLogic Discord. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.